Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Roofing Contractors Best of Success podcast, the Legal Insights Edition. I'm Roofing Contractor Editor-in-Chief Art Eisner, and I'm glad to be joined, as always, by Trent Cotney of Adams and Reese. Trent, I'm glad you're here joining us to talk about some of the top legal issues affecting the roofing industry. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Art. It's always good to see you.
Trent, we've talked about the benefits of the Federal Inflation Reduction Act and the tax credits available before, but you've really been diving into the paperwork lately. What are you learning?
Yeah, so the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, huge piece of legislation. You're talking thousands and thousands of pages. And you're right, we've talked in the past about some of the tax benefits and savings that can be passed on to customers, for one-off residential or commercial type projects. But what's interesting is when you do a deep dive into IRA, there is a chance to really create some revenue by looking into a couple of different things that they've offered. One is they've incentivized community solar projects. And what this is basically a solar project, solar field, something of that nature, which allows for excess energy to be purchased. It's a great opportunity for developers to access tax credits, and just really gives you an opportunity to kind of tap into some of that if you are in the solar space. And I know a lot of our contractors are. The other thing that was interesting is there's a lot of money that is set aside to help disadvantaged communities and rural communities with environmental and solar grants. Okay. To give you some idea of what that is, $3 billion were allocated to both environmental and climate change grants. There's a variety of tax incentives for any kind of solar project that involves a disadvantaged community. And here's the interesting thing, Art, $11.6 billion was set aside for rural communities. So, a lot of our country, you think about it, there's a lot of cities, but there's also a lot of land out there. And this really gives you the opportunity to potentially go in, engage in some, environmental, sustainable, or solar type projects, combine that maybe with some other construction, and really, pass that on to the customer or enjoy it yourself from a developer standpoint. A ton of really interesting things in there, and I encourage everybody to kind of take a closer look at some of those options.
And those dollars you're speaking of, the $11 billion, that's future money. In that meaning, a lot of that is going to be earmarked for projects, ongoing. So, are you saying contractors, now's the time to get in?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're already starting to see some of this money come out in the public bid arena. We've had a variety of projects where larger contractors have wanted to bid on either, local, municipal, state type projects where there is some of this funding involved. These are future projects, right? This has just come out. It's relatively young legislation, so it's going to be a while before all the money trickles through. But a lot of opportunity here. Obviously politically charged, I get the downside, but if I'm looking at the positive, I'm saying, hey, there's money and revenue to be had, and there's some great incentives that you can pass on to your customer.
And in particular, this seems to be more appealing to those larger contractors or contractors that have the ability to scale, right?
Absolutely. If you've got the ability to handle an entire subdivision or a large geographic area, those are the type of projects where you're really seeing some large numbers, and it can be very lucrative. This is not tight margin work. This is very good work, and there's a lot of money out there. So encourage everybody to kind of take a closer look at that. If you're not currently engaged in any kind of solar or environmental type construction, might want to consider adding it, because this is a great time. It's pretty easy sell when you pass through some of these benefits to your end user.
All right, great insight, Trent. Let's switch gears a little bit. Summertime is obviously peak season for the roofing community, and construction is hot everywhere. Literally, it's very common for us to be talking about heat exposure and all those risks during the summer months. But we're in a really epic time in terms of the heat waves that construction workers are facing out there. Can you relay a little bit about what you're seeing and what you're dealing with, perhaps on the legal end for due to this great heat wave, prolonged heat wave we're seeing?
Yeah, it's crazy. You and I were talking before we started. I'm here in Florida and I can't remember the last time it had been this hot for this many days, especially this late in summer. I mean, we expect it to be higher temperatures, but we're constantly facing a heat index in excess of 100. Brutal temperatures all across the US. And we've talked about the heat injury and illness standard that OSHA is currently promulgating. But what's interesting, Art, is, we're seeing a lot of injuries, and unfortunately, we've had a handful of fatalities that have happened as a result of heat injury and illness. It creeps up on you, and if you're not hydrated, if you're not taking breaks, if you're not aware of what, the signs of impairment are from, heat exhaustion, then you really run the risk of having an employee get hurt, or God forbid, have a fatality on your hands. So a variety of both state and local governments have tried to combat this. Recently, Texas enacted a law, and then the governor shot it down and basically said, yeah, we're not going to have more breaks. Miami-Dade County did the same thing, where they said, okay, there's required breaks, there's other things that need to be done, some training. What's interesting is sort of the dynamic here, Art, between, both of those states, Texas and Florida, are federal OSHA states. OSHA has, even though it doesn't have a heat injury and illness standard right now, it does have the general duty clause, right? Which says that you've got a duty as an employer to make sure that your employees are safe from recognized hazards. Well, everybody knows that heat is a recognized hazard. So there is a framework in place. It's not as specific as you would like. So a little bit of give and take and dynamic between state and local government and the federal government there. And that's why I think you're seeing some of these challenges come up. Bottom line, though, is please, whatever you do, keep your workers hydrated. Make sure they're taking breaks. If you're outside and working, work early. Don't work during the middle of the day. If that sun's up at noon, that heat index is going to be up there. So please be safe. We've got a couple more months of this kind of heat, and then we'll be through it.
Right. It sounds like it's a difficult line for roofers to have to balance. They don't want to deal with more regulation and being required or being told that they need to take more breaks necessarily. But it's not always enough for them to necessarily self-police, their crews out there. Companies can't always control what they're doing, in the field. What are there any, recommendations that you've told contractors?
So one of the things that, and I think this is important for our listeners to hear, everybody, you should know to have a water jug or water bottles or something on site, right? Everybody knows that you bring water. We had an injury here happen recently where we had someone fall off a roof because they cramped up. And that's another thing. You burn electrolytes, you don't have those key essential minerals that you need when it gets hot. Have, Gatorade, Powerade, something that you can have on site that your crew is drinking, because you lose that quick. And if you cramp up during if you're climbing a ladder, using scaffolding up on a roof, wherever you're at, regardless of what you're doing, you can't have that happen. So, and it creeps up on you fast. So I encourage everybody not just have water, but have something that will replenish the electrolytes, because I can attest to at least one injury as a result of that.
Well, yeah, cramping at height, not where you want to be.
Right.
I know you're not a meteorologist or anything, but also this heat wave is also, driving some concerns about what the remaining storm season could look like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, look, I'm a lawyer. It's my job to be, negative and pessimistic and conservative, but the Gulf temperature this morning was 92.6 degrees. There are reports of, the coral dying from bleaching from the heat. When I hear stuff like that, it causes me a lot of concern, because that heat is fuel for hurricanes. And when we get storms in the Gulf or in the Atlantic, that heat will act as food for that hurricane, and we're going to be looking at some pretty powerful storms. So that scares me. And I know, storms are good for business, but we don't need another Ian. It was absolutely cataclysmic, and I think there's enough work to go around right now. We don't need one or two of those this year if we can avoid it.
Right, I gotcha. Well, thank you, Trent, for your insight today and all you're doing for the roofing and construction industries. Where can people find out more?
Sure, they can follow me on my social media. It's just Trent Cotney, or you can hit me up on email, trent.cotney@arlaw.com.
All right, and before you check out those sites, please be sure to sign up for our new free e-magazine and e-newsletters on roofingcontractor.com so you can stay on top of the latest news and information impacting the industry. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.